card number 136 from the 1953 Bowman Color set. It's Jim Breidwieser of the New York Yankees. It's a pretty unique angle here of Yankee Stadium, and it looks like Jim is hanging out at second base, waiting for the runner, who is most definitely going to be out. Looks like Jim's a little bored there, standing at second base. Beautiful card from this beautiful set. Jim is one of the Yankees' good young infield prospects, and he's lucky because he gets to be a part of this iconic set. If it's card number 136, it must be session number 136 of Card Room Live. You guessed it, guys. It's not a show. It's a hangout for fellow vintage collectors, whether we have guests or not. We are always finding ways to waste time looking at and talking about old cardboard, and through it all, we try to make it time well wasted. And dare I say that we've done a good job of doing just that for the past 4 years. If you're here with us live, welcome to you. Welcome to all my fellow YouTubers, to the commenters, to the folks from all over social media land. And if you're new to Card Room Live, don't be afraid to say hello. You're among cardboard friends. This is the live stream where everybody knows your name. And it may take us a few tries, but we'll learn your name soon enough. If you're listening to this later, however, you might be going to or coming home from work. Maybe you're recovering from the National. Maybe you're sorting cards, looking at eBay, rolling out meatballs, walking the dog, sitting on the john, putting the kids to bed. Maybe you're battling raccoons in the backyard. Maybe you're wondering if Eddie Wakus is going to come up tonight. Whatever you might be doing, I hope you get something out of it. If you want to get in touch or have ideas for future sessions, you can always email me at bowman53channel@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram, bowman53_Alex, on X 1953 Bowman Color, and on Blue Sky, Bowman53. And of course, all that information can be found in the description below. This session of Card Room Live is brought to you by Hassan Cigarettes. The Oriental Smoke Court Tip cigarettes are the way to go, the largest selling brand of cigarettes in America. You will find baseball picture cards in every pack. Hassan Cigarettes. And just a public service announcement, Card Room Live does not endorse smoking of any kind. However, we do endorse pre-war. So good evening and happy August to everybody. Let's do a quick check of who is in the chat. Mike, the sports history collector, is here. Lou Rock TV is here. Carlisle Road is here. Ruben is here. Mike Polina is here. What's up, Mike? Called Shot Cards. Stephen with a PH. Peacemaker Cards. Mike J. Hawker Vintage Cards is here. Mitchell, the White Sox fan card collector. Reese Indy Card Ranger is here. Another wrench holder, Stuke, is here. Peter B is here. Rocket Rick J18 Sports Cards is here. What's up, Rick? Good to see you. Maxa Jackson is here, and the list goes on. Let's See Sports Cards. Great to see everybody tonight. Well, let's waste no more time. I'm excited about this. I just got back from the West Coast, and while I was away on this trip, I noticed something on Instagram that instantly caught my eye. It was a new book, at least new to me, about baseball history and baseball cards. I mean, what could be better than that? And I reached out to the author of this book. I'm going to hold this up, and he's going to be chatting with us tonight. First of all, here's the book, One Splendid Season, Baseball in America in 1912. And it's told with the words and images of the Hassan Triple Folder set, a fantastic pre-war set that gets a lot of love and deserved attention in this book. And we're going to be talking with the author. So here he is, Mr. Phil Rosenzweig. Phil,
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Glad to be with you.
Thanks for being here. Yeah. And like I said, I just reached out to Phil, I don't know, maybe a few days ago about this. Mm-hmm. Phil, how long has the book been out?
It just came out in July. It's been a long process to get it done. There was a softback version a couple of years ago. I tried to get a commercial publisher, couldn't, then decided just to do it myself. But the book is in stock just as of the beginning of July.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm going to go ahead and put a link to the book for anybody that wants to take a look at it on Amazon. And I'm also going to share Jim's site, I'm sorry, Phil's site as well. But Phil, before we get into the book itself, I wanted to ask you just to kind of get us started, take us back to the early days for you, both in terms of like baseball and cards, because I know as a kid you collected. So can you kind of get us acclimated with how you got into it all?
Sure. Well, like most of us, began collecting when I was a little kid. My dad took me to the local variety store when I was 5 years old and thought every American boy should know something about the national pastime. Bought a pack of cards for 5 cents, which is what they cost in 1960 when I was five, born in 1955, and I still have those cards. I My favorite card of that set, and still to this day one of my favorites, is this beauty. This is Gino Simoli, 1960. I loved the colors. I loved the layout. I thought he was a handsome guy. I learned later that the photograph was taken at Seal Stadium in San Francisco, which is where I'm from. I'm from the Bay Area. And I want to mention one other thing about this card that I really like. He's wearing a Cardinals uniform, but he's playing for the Pirates. In
Oh,
those days, Topps did not feel they had to black out the cap or do any nonsense like that. I mean, they respected the intelligence of the collector.
right.
Okay, he used to be with the Cardinals, now he's with the Pirates. But I really began collecting actively a few years later, 1963, when I was in the third grade. Every kid in all the boys in class were collecting, and I collected pretty steadily 63 through about 68 and have most of those sets. Although living in California, we never got the last sets, and we always figured it was because the cards began in New York and they never quite made their way out west. I'm not sure if that's true, but I was very good at the first series, and usually not so good at the later series. Anyway, by the time I was in high school, I think Topps had taken a step down. The 69 set, I think, as we all know, for contractual issues, the photographs weren't as good. I didn't think the design was as good. And I discovered at that point vintage cards, which vintage in those days did not mean the 60s. Vintage in those days meant, the tobacco and the pre-war. There was some publications that I subscribed to. There was a thing out of Long Island called The Trader Speaks. There was one out of Tennessee called The Ball Card Collector. And I had a checklist, so I knew what the numbers were for various sets. And you could look at these ads and send a few dollars away and get some really nice cards. So I was interested in the Bowmans, 51 Bowman, came across 53 Bowman, loved the 53 Bowmans. I think the first one I had was this baby. This is Sam Denty.
Yeah.
I just love the clean design, the clean look of it, and it's always been one of my favorite sets. I think my favorite of the set might be this Allie Reynolds.
Oh, sure.
And if you look at this one, my gosh, he's in clear focus. You're looking up, so you've got the facade and the lights behind him in soft focus. He's holding the ball. It's just a beautiful composition, great card. Anyway, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. The Giants were my team. I didn't have much money. I was in high school. So what did I collect? I collected Giants. And so I
Mm.
tried to get all the Giants I could in Bowman's and even in some pre-war. And so in those days, you could send away and to various folks who just had stacks of T205s, T206s. And so, I have things like this. I've got all these
Oh boy.
T206s. And they've been sitting in this for years now. I mean, you've got 4 John McGraws and 3 Christy Mathewsons, and also some, T205s. Again, pardon the fact that they're all Giants, but that's all I had money for.
Sure.
Um, but somewhere in there, I also came across the T202s.
Mm.
And the first time I saw a T202, it just captured my attention. And I would say 2 things about the T202s compared to the 5s and the 6s, because the T206 is by far the most popular of these, and I think people like the T205s. But there's a couple things about the T202s that really grabbed my attention. One is you have this black and white photograph in the center panel. And oh, by the way, you gave a nice plug for Hassan cigarettes at the beginning. This
Oh
is
boy, look at that.
one of the packs looks like.
Yes.
And so I won't do it, but if you take this out, you can fold the two end panels over the center panel, and it fits neatly into that box. But the thing about these center panel photographs that I think is really important, these are the first examples that I'm aware of, and I think this is true, of fast shutter speed photography on baseball cards. A lot of these photographs were taken with Graflex cameras that had shutter speeds up to 1,000th of a second, which means you see dust being kicked up or dirt being kicked up. You see runners barreling into catchers. You see balls frozen in midair on a pickoff attempt to first base. And so you're seeing the game captured in a way that was relatively novel at that time. The other thing that these cards have, and again, no knock about the T205 or T206. I mean, great thing about the hobby is there's a lot of different sets and people have their favorites. But the T205s, T206s have no captions on the back. They just have the design of the logo. The T205s began to have small captions, but the T206s have, very significant captions. And the end panels are about 70 words long, and the center panels are over 100 words long. And if you take all of the end panels and all of the center panels and you transcribe it, which I've done, you've got about a 50-page book. And it's a 50-page book that tells you a lot about the players, about the era in which they live, the places they come from. They came from mill towns, and they came from coal mining towns, and they came from farms. And you learn about the way people on the East Coast, the writers, thought about the West Coast.
Sure.
You learn about the way the game was played, comments about squeeze plays and about stealing bases and about how first basemen no longer played stuck to the base but roamed off the base. So there's really a lot there. So what I began to do after college, I kind of came back to collecting. I never collected tops again. I tried to fill in my 60s sets. I tried to collect the 53 Bowmans. I collected the two sets of the year I was born, which is 1955. So the 55 Topps, 55 Bowman. And then I collected the T202s. I did this pretty much in the late 80s into the early 90s. And by the early 90s, I'd pretty much completed the set. There's a couple cards I don't have out of all 132. There's a few variants they're super expensive. And the other thing that happened, and this will surprise nobody, is by the early 90s, when I was beginning to buy the last cards I needed, they started to come like this.
Right.
In these slabs. Now, if you're a young collector, you probably don't remember a time when cards were not slabbed like this. But most of my collection was not that way. I have my T202s in a booklet like this, and I've got a binder of just page after page. Well, I don't know what to do with slabbed cards. So for a bunch of reasons, at that point, my collection was pretty much done. But
right.
What I felt was that this was a set that had so much of interest, both in terms of the center panels and the captions, that it deserved to have some kind of annotation. There was a real research to be done about this set, and I would like to do that. And I had this idea a long time ago, and careers get in the way and life gets in the way and you don't do it. But eventually I came back to it and thought I wanted to produce an annotated book about the T202 set. And the question then was, well, okay, how do you present this? Do you present them alphabetically by player name? You could. Do you present them in terms of the center panel checklist, which, Jefferson Burdick put a checklist together? You could do that. But then I realized that there might be a more interesting way to present these, and that was to use the cards to tell the story of the year in which they were released. The year in which they were released was 1912. And if if you're like me, one of your favorite books is this one, The Glory of Their Times. This is one of the later versions. This is the original. It's the
Right.
same book. And what Lawrence Ritter did, I think, as many people watching this will know, is he tracked down and interviewed a lot of the players from that era, many of whom talk in great detail about their lives and about the games. And the season that is mentioned more than any other is the season of 1912, partly because he talked to a lot of Giants and Red Sox, and the Giants and the Red Sox were the two teams in the World Series. But there's a lot of other people, George Gibson, many, many more who are interviewed in the book and are in the set. In fact, the only person he talks to who's not in the T202 set is Harry Hooper of the Red Sox.
Mm.
Everybody else, until the last chapters when he added a few later people, they were all in the T202 set. And so I decided that the 1912 season merited this focus. Now, let me say a minute about 1912. You have Smokey Joe Wood wins 34 games. Rube Marquard wins 19 in a row. You have this great showdown between Walter Johnson and Smokey Joe Wood in September of that year. Walter Johnson also had a winning streak that was extraordinary. Chief Wilson of the Pirates sets the record for triples in a season with 36, and on and on. But not just that. 1912 is the year that Fenway Park opens. It's the year that Navin Field, which later became Tiger Stadium, opens in its modern configuration. It's the year that Redland Field, that later became Crosley Field in Cincinnati, opens. It's the year that Ebbets Field was built, constructed, although it only opened the next spring. So there's lots of stuff, as well as that's the year that Ty Cobb went into the stands at Hilltop Park in New York and, beat up a fan and was suspended, and the Tigers went on strike. There's lots and lots of stuff going on that year. So I thought, well, what if I take the cards and arrange them to tell the story from the beginning of the year to the end, including the World Series? It's mainly a story of, I can't say the pennant races were that close, because the Giants and the Red Sox won by quite a bit. Although at the beginning, the White Sox were in the mix, the Reds were in the mix, the Cubs came back and made a run at it. And then there's the team that should have been there but wasn't, the defending world champion Athletics, who again were the world champions in 1913, but disappointed in 1912. So they're also a story here.
Right.
So anyway, that's the way the book is laid out. And I show in the book about 112 of the cards out of the 132. There's about 20 that I don't show because they're redundant. It's the center panel appears elsewhere and the end panels appear elsewhere. But I can tell you every center panel and every end panel of the set appears in the book. They're all from my collection with, I think, one exception. And I did my own high resolution scans, and I won't bore you with it now, but I did a comparison of my scans and the ones that you find in the Library of Congress collection. And I think mine have, let's just say, I think mine are better in terms of clarity and color. So it's really a fine set. They're all reproduced in the book in actual size. So the dimensions that you see in the book are the actual dimensions of the card. And what I do on each page is I've got something that happened on a given day, and I talk about the games and I talk about players. And then on the other side, you can hold it up or I can hold it up. But I just open at random, and this is what a page will look like. And you'll have on one side, so this is June 9th, and I've got two cards of Athletics. It's the same center panel, which is called Collins Easily Safe. That's Eddie Collins getting back to the base. And then you see here, actually, this is one of the examples of Eddie Collins. He's one of 6 players who has 2 different portraits, and I show them both. And so there's a player that is featured on each side, on each page, and I talk a bit about that player. You can also see here, and again, I just opened at random, this photograph was taken by the Paul Thompson Studio. This is a photograph taken that was used in the 1911 Spalding Guide, was then used as the basis for the T205 photograph. So I show you the original photograph and this one. So anyway, I do that for every page, and so it's a complete presentation of the set, but arranged in a way to tell the story of the season. So that's
Right.
a snapshot.
I mean, Phil, incredible amount of work, and I love that you had to sort of workshop the idea of what do I do with this set. You knew that you wanted to showcase it in some way, but the idea to tie it to that season, and then I can only imagine the amount of research that went through, like actually going through the season and trying to pair the cards with certain events. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I don't know if that's going to give you some PTSD thinking about all the different ins and outs of that, but how did that process go for you?
Boy, it was aided by a couple things. Again, I had this idea a long time ago, and I spent a long time actually downloading New York Times articles day by day of that season.
Wow.
And then, of course, Baseball Reference was, an essential resource. And between the two of them and a few other newspapers that I was able to do, I did all of it online. I didn't go to any libraries. It did take a long time. It was a labor of love. I'm not a super young guy anymore, so I did a lot of this during COVID when I was officially retired and had time. But I just learned a ton. And what I did also on the captions, I annotate the captions. So on every caption, I take some phrase or some comment and try to explicate it a bit. And I can give a few examples of that if you'd like.
Sure.
So here's one. This is our friend Christy Mathewson. And on the back, I'm just going to read what the caption here says, just one sentence. It says here, absolutely subduing the Athletics in 1905 and mowing down the Yankees in 1910, 14 in one game. Well, I read that and I said, hang on. I know what they mean in 1905. He beat the Athletics in the World Series 3 games, one of the legendary World Series performances. But Yankees in 1910, when did Christy Mathewson face the Yankees in 1910? The Yankees were not, neither team was in the World Series. There was no interleague play in those days. What's this about? So I looked into that. And the answer is there was a thing called the City Series. And I didn't know this at all, although in Total Baseball and a few encyclopedias, you can learn quite a bit about this. In cities like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, St. Louis that had two teams, if neither team was in the World Series, very often during the World Series, after the regular series ended, the two teams would face off. And these were, strictly speaking, exhibition games. You won't see them on Baseball Reference. They're not in any official statistics, but these were serious contests. They were the talk of the town. They were well attended. They brought in a lot of money for the owners. They gave huge bragging rights. And sure enough, in 1910, because neither the Giants nor the Yankees or the Highlanders in those days were in the World Series, they had a 7 or 8 game City Series at the Polo Grounds in Hilltop Park. And Mathewson won several of those games. He was really the star. And a lot of people that year were wondering, Russ Ford is this great new pitcher for the Highlanders. Christy Mathewson, of course, the great ace for the Giants. How will they do matching up? So that's what that's about. Well, I had no idea about that until I looked into it. I should have mentioned Total Baseball was another resource that I used, and a book called A Game of Inches by Peter Morris. Extraordinary resource to understand the origins of terms, phrases. When was a switch hitter called a switch hitter?
Right.
When was a relief pitcher called a relief pitcher as opposed to an emergency pitcher, and so forth. Let me give you one more example. So this is a card. It's got Ty Cobb on the side with George Moriarty. The center panel is called Good Play at Third, and Cobb is not one of these players. The fielder is Moriarty. But let me read from the caption. It says here, this is Billy Evans, the umpire, is quoted as saying he had the Cubans crazy by his great base running. Cubans. What does he mean by Cubans? What's going on here? Well, I looked into that, and at the end of the season, in a few years there, in 1909, 1910, one or more team, the Tigers one year, the Athletics, the Giants, would go on a barnstorming tour to Cuba.
Right.
And they would play the Havana team and the Almendares team. And then I would look up what happened in those games, and sure enough, Moriarty is playing well. These are very significant games because some American black players in the precursor to the Negro Leagues at the end of the season would go to Cuba.
Right.
And so the teams that the Tigers were playing were not composed only of Cubans. They were also composed of Cubans and American blacks. And this was really the first opportunity to see, what level they were. And the answer, of course, was that, the Tigers had their hands full with the local teams there who were composed of these great players. So I got a page on that as well. I have a few pages where I break from the form and I talk about things like the City Series or baseball in Cuba or field days. I don't know if you know what field days were. There's mention in on one player, Hans Lobert, is said to have run the bases in how many ever seconds, which set a new record. I said, record for what? So I looked into that. Well, a few times, 1908, 1909, they would hold, once in Cincinnati, once in Chicago, a so-called field day where players from many teams, not just the teams playing that day, but other teams would send players and minor leaguers to do things like a fungo hitting contest. Who can hit the ball farthest? Who can throw the ball farthest? Who can run the bases fastest? Who can go from home to first fastest? They had a contest for catchers for accuracy of throwing down to second base. They had a target. How many times can you hit the target?
That's great.
So I've got I've got a page on that. And I have another page that I thought was very interesting. This again comes out of the captions about how player performance was measured. In those days, well, yes, there was batting average and there was wins and losses for pitchers, but there was not yet earned run average. And earned run average only came out a year later in one league, and then the next it was adopted. But you read in the captions, there's a desire to have some way to say, well, this pitcher won this many games and lost that many, but they were really good at not giving up runs. But there was not a single measure yet. That came later. There was no measure for runs batted in yet. There was an idea of total bases. They talked about this many hits, this many bases, but there was not yet an idea of slugging percentage. So again, what I try to do is explicate the way player performance was captured at that time.
Right.
Those are some of the things. There's a lot more, but I really tried to mine these captions and go into depth to understand the game and the society in which all of this took place.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we got a couple questions here from folks in the chat. A couple people, Mike and Jay Hawker Vintage, are asking about the Joe Jackson image. Is there anything you can share about that?
I sure can. If you give me a moment, I'll find it for you.
Sure.
Yes. So it's called Lord Catches His Man, Lord Gets His Man. Let me find it for you here. I'm going to flip through. And here it is. So it looks like this. Can you see that?
Yeah, if you can just tilt it just a little bit. There you go. Perfect.
There we go. Okay, so this is Lord Catches His Man. This is Tannehill and Lord, so two Chicago White Sox. The photograph is taken in Cleveland, and we can tell that partly because of the C on the runner's cap, but also the fence in right field. That's the high fence in Cleveland along the right field. Now, there was this. So Joe Jackson is not mentioned by name,
Right.
and he does not have an end panel, and he's not mentioned in the center panel. However, there was a photograph taken of the exact same play from a photographer standing right next to this one, or kneeling right next to this one, slightly different angle, the same play that showed up in a Cleveland newspaper the next day. And it clearly says, this is Joe Jackson. Also, if you blow the picture up, you can see that it's Jackson. Let me show you what I've done in the book. And let's see, Jackson is on page 117. Yeah, so this is my page of that.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And I blow up that center image, and then I have here my little finger is touching a picture of Jackson. So that is him. We know that's him. We even know the date. The date here is May 5th, 1911. And I write here, the play shown in the photo took place May 5th, 1911. A local newspaper ran a slightly different photo with the caption, quote, "The Nap outfielder executed a fall-away slide when he tried to go to third on Lajoie's smash to Tannehill, but Lord touched him before Joe's feet hit the sack." So that is Joe Jackson, but he's not mentioned. There are also, let me just hasten to add, there are many, many great players on the end panels, but there are a couple players that don't have an end panel but are featured on the center panel. One of them is Napoleon Lajoie.
Right.
He's on a card called A Great Batsman, which he was, and you see him standing prominently at bat. Sam Crawford does not have an end panel, but he shows up on two different center panels. Jackson, regrettably, is not mentioned at all.
Right.
So that's the answer to that.
Great. A couple other folks asked if you have a favorite card among all of these cards.
No. I've probably got, I think the ones I like the most have really vibrant colors and really interesting center panel. I'll show you one. I no is not a good answer to that. So I'm gonna show you one that I particularly like.
I mean, I have the same problem when people ask me about the Bowman color set. You know, you kind of love all of them, right? It's fun to pick out one once in a while.
You know, there's ones of I'm going to show you a couple that I guess qualify. This is one that is. This is one of, so the first ones I got, I was 15 years old, and I sent away a few dollars, and I got a handful of cards. One was a Ty Cobb, and the Ty Cobb steals third, the famous Conlon picture. That's of course a classic. But here's one, this bottom one here. So that's Roger Bresnahan and the pitcher Bob Harmon, and it's called Caught Asleep Off First. And what you have, if you look closely, you can see the ball is right here.
Yeah.
And the ball is caught in midair. And what's charming about this is the caption that says, baseball is a game of wits and you can't wander too far off the bag. And here this runner strayed too far and was caught asleep off first. And the photograph shows him waking up to the realization he will not possibly get back in time. Well, actually, he probably did get back in time.
Sure.
The ball is moving, he's moving too. But I always found that charming. Now, that's not the most prominent card in the set, but things like that I find just delightful.
Right.
Of course, who would not like some of the, I think one of the other ones that I got that at the very beginning, I've had this card for 55 years, is this one of Mathewson and Chief Myers with this great photograph before the 1911 World Series, John McGraw shaking hands with Harry Davis.
Right.
And that card number 48, called Just Before the Battle, there are, I think, 9 or 10 different combinations of end panels. It's the most common center panel. Those
Hmm.
are a couple examples. I could
Right.
go on, but I think the
And
ones I like, they either have really interesting center panel images or vibrant colors or intriguing captions or some combination.
I'm so glad you showed that McGraw one because I'm still kind of midway through the book, but that one caught my eye because I think actually you show it in the early part of the book where that photograph had been essentially like an early version of Photoshop where they took out the umpire that was in the
Yeah.
original photograph.
Yes. So where I can, I spent a lot of time trying to find the photographs that were used for the center panels. And so this is what you're referring to here,
Yes.
where you can see that the original photograph by Charles Conlon at the start of the 1911 World Series shows umpire Tommy Connolly between McGraw and Davis and shows the Polo Grounds in the background. But they airbrushed them out. And there's
Yeah.
a number of examples there where things get airbrushed out. Oftentimes an umpire gets airbrushed out. There's examples of photographs that have an umpire in the background on the card gone, or buildings in the background, or
Right.
billboards in the background. So one of the things I tried to do, and through Facebook groups of people who collect vintage photographs, is I would say, hey, does anybody have photographs that were used on these cards? And
Right.
a number of collectors would say, yes, I have this one, and they would very generously allow me to include them. So the difference between the first version I did a few years ago and now the hardback version, not just that it's hardback and I've corrected a few little spelling errors, but I've been able to add more photographs
Hmm.
that in some cases have changed my understanding of what's going on in a picture. There are some that I didn't quite know what was happening because the details weren't very clear, but when I got the original photograph, I was able to know more clearly the date, the location, who the players were.
Right. Right. I mean, I found that fascinating. One, just because I don't know, I tend to think of something like that as being a more modern thing, whereas they were doing that very early on. And two, just how exceptionally well done it was. Like if I hadn't seen that in the book, I would have just
Yeah,
assumed that that photograph was, untouched.
yeah.
And I'm assuming they did it because they really wanted the focus to be on those two players or those two personas without having the umpire, um, be part of the focus. It's just interesting to see how these cards were made.
Mhm.
So, the other thing I like about the book, Phil, is that you've got other elements in there, and the one that stands out to me are the postcards. And I think that you also have been collecting postcards. Can you
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that?
sure. Okay, thanks for that. So I think I was 9 years old in 1964. Some family friends were visiting their family in Philadelphia, and the lady of the family sent me a postcard of Connie Mack Stadium. She knew I was a big baseball fan. And so, I grew up listening to broadcasts, and Russ Hodges would say, "Here we are tonight in Crosley Field or Forbes Field," but I never saw these things. When she sent me that postcard of Connie Mack Stadium, and I still have it, that just kind of the light went on, and I began then collecting them. And if my father would go on a business trip to the East Coast, Dad, when you're in Chicago, can you bring me a postcard of the ballparks? And he would do that, and I gradually built that up. And then by the time I was a teenager, realized there were other people collecting them. So this
Mm.
was again kind of one of my passions. I'll tell you a little story that some of the people here may relate to. I was at this was years ago. I was working company in California, and I was at a Christmas dinner, and I was next to a young lady from a different department, and we were chatting, and she said, "Do you have any hobbies?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I collect postcards of baseball stadiums." And she looked at me like I had just come from Mars and said, "Why would you do that?" And I said, "Well, they combine four of my interests: baseball, American urban history, architecture, and photography. It's a
Mm.
perfect hobby." And she looked at me like I was this weird person. And, that was kind of the end of that possible relationship. Hey, I plead guilty. I I've always been fascinated by them, and over the years have collected many, and I now have kind of binders of these as well. So I, you're right. Where possible, then I made high resolution scans of these, and so you will see in this book multiple very nice scanned images of Shibe Park, of Fenway Park, of Navin Field in Detroit. I'm really every park except there are none of the St. Louis stadiums at that era. There's none of Griffith Stadium in Washington, D.C., but I think every other one is included. Not the Braves either. There's none of where the Braves were at that time. They had not yet moved into Braves Field. That was maybe 1914 or so.
Mm-hmm.
But almost every other one, there are postcards. They're very high resolution scans, but here I must tell you, while the cards are the actual size, the postcards are slightly reduced because there was no way to print them in their full size and allow space for everything else. But I have those. I have some of the P2 pins. I've got a few of the, I think, B14 blankets. So I've tried to supplement the T202s with a lot of other cards, including some T3s, which are beautiful, some T205s, 6s, and some T207s. Those are not from my collection. Maybe one or two are, most are not.
Right. Somebody's suggesting that you should send that woman a copy of your book. I also wanted to mention the photographs, because you've got photographs kind of throughout the book that are either directly or indirectly related to what's happening. And are all of those from a single source?
So many of those are from Library of Congress,
Mm-hmm.
and they are publicly available. There's this beautiful image I had on the opening leaf of the Boston Stadium, Huntington Park. That's from the Boston Public Library. There's a few others that I got from some other sources. Detroit Public Library. I had two that I really wanted. I had to pay a little bit for those, but I thought that was important. Some of you may know a gentleman named Jim Chapman, who has the Chapman Deadball collection, and he very kindly allowed me to use a few of his photographs. There's a Sam Crawford, and there's one photograph. He has an actual fast shutter speed action shot from a crucial play in the 1912 World Series, and I used that as well. So and I cite the Detroit Public Library, and I cite Jim Chapman.
Right.
And then Library of Congress, I didn't need permission, but I do mention that frequently. There's one or two others, and then there's a few that collectors just lent to me, and some of the center panel photographs where I have the originals, they sent them to me, and I thanked them at the beginning of the book. I didn't say, well, this picture came from this person, but they know who they are. But that was very helpful.
Sure. Somebody's asking if you have a complete set of the cards featured in the book. The answer is yes, isn't it?
No, I think there's two that I'm missing. I couldn't even tell you which they are now. So there's card 29, which is Devlin Gets His Man, and there's card 74, Too Late for Devlin. Who is Devlin? Art Devlin was a third baseman for the Giants, and at the beginning of the 1912 season, in April, he was sold to Boston. The cards had already been made up showing him as a Giant, and then after he shifted teams, they changed and show him as a Rustler. So, which is what the Braves were before they were the Braves. So there are a few variants there, and one of them, I think it's the Giants one, they're very rare and they're very expensive. And I just, I never got around to buying that. So I'm missing, I think, those two cards. There's another card that full honesty, full candor here. I believe I used the Library of Congress image because the card I have was in a slab and it was going to be very difficult to do a proper photograph of it. So I think maybe there's three cards I think there's 2 cards I don't have, and there's maybe 3 images in the book, or 1 image in the book that is not mine. But otherwise, they're all mine, including there's a couple cards where there's some tape marks on the back.
Oh,
And
okay.
I just decided to leave it because these are my cards. And so, as I said, I began the set a long time ago, and over the years I upgraded a number of cards, and so
Sure.
the ones I have now they're in very nice shape. I've never sent a card in to be graded. I
Hmm.
don't know what they would be. There's a few I bought that are graded, but my cards in my binder, I just leave them raw.
Right. Right. Great question from Vintage Cards. How did you become aware of these cards as a 15-year-old?
That's a long time ago, and uh, so again, I became aware of these 2 publications. There was one called The Trader Speaks, which came out of Long Island, and there was one out of Tennessee called The Ball Card Collector. And somehow I became aware of the tobacco cards. And then there was an auction. It was maybe monthly. There was a look up Charles Bray, Bray, and this was an auction of paper collectibles, not just baseball cards, non-sports, Valentine's Day cards, postcards of Niagara Falls, pictures of presidents, all kinds of Americana paper. And what he would do, somehow I got a hold of this, and every month it would list things, and you would make a bid. And I somehow bought, there must have been 5 or 6 T202s, and I probably spent a couple dollars.
Hmm.
And I got 5 or 6 in the mail, and I just loved them.
Yeah.
And I know people who have never really developed an affection for the T202s. If you want a Ty Cobb, they want a T206 Cobb or a T205 Cobb, and they don't want the other stuff. For the reasons I mentioned earlier, I love the center panels and I love the captions. So that's what happened. And then I it's been a long time. I don't really remember how it went from there.
Hmm.
By the time I finished college, it was now the end of the 70s, and now the hobby was becoming much more well established. You had some national publications, like I think it was called Baseball Hobby News, that I subscribed to, and now there were car shows, so you would go to those. I remember when I moved to the East Coast in 1986, and I went to the Willow Grove show. I think I had maybe a quarter of the T202 set, and I went to the Willow Grove show, and I bought the last card in the set, Wheat Strikes Out, Zach Wheat, this wonderful card. I paid $75 for it. I had never, ever paid that kind of money for a baseball card. And I remember I bought it, and I went back to my car, and I just kind of looked at it. I thought, am I nuts? And then there was a show the next summer in Atlantic City, and none of these cards were slabbed, and none were very expensive, and I just kind of filled the card set out that way.
Yeah.
I think I was lucky to do it when I did it, because by the early 90s everything was pretty much slabbed, and the prices went way up.
Sure. Sure. Here's a great question from Reese. Is there a fact that you discovered during your research that shocked or surprised you the most?
Yeah, I'm going to tell a little story here. Shocked. No, I mean, the whole thing about playing in Cuba
Hmm.
was interesting. And then that led me into learning about Sunday baseball. There was no Sunday baseball on the East Coast. Well, what would the Giants and other teams do on Sundays? They would play local teams.
Hmm.
And in May of that year, the Giants agreed. They sent sort of their B squad, some of their regulars, not their leading pitchers, to a game in Paterson, New Jersey. And they took, I don't know, the train or something over there. Well, they show up there, and the local team that they have agreed to play is called the Smart Sets. They were a black team.
Hmm.
And the pitcher for the Giants, Druck, I think his name was a Texan. He says, "I'm not playing these guys. I don't play colored teams." And he only played by being called a different name. He agreed to pitch, but under a different name. And the game went on, and then there was a controversy at the end. The book talks about it, and the Giants end up kind of getting onto their bus and leaving, and the game ends in a near riot. But you learn something about race relations. So that they did play black players in Cuba, but there were also these Sunday games. I then learned, so building on Sunday baseball, in 1918, I think it was, or 1919, it was either at the end of World War I or just after. Christy Mathewson was now on the Reds. He was managing the Reds, and he was playing in New York against the Giants. They wanted to have a benefit for the one of the Irish regiments in the Army, and they had it on Sunday. And McGraw and Mathewson were arrested and charged with violating this ban on Sunday baseball, and appeared in court. And the magistrate said, "What you have done is patriotic. It's not a violation," and case dismissed. And this was one of the things that helped move towards Sunday baseball. So I learned some things like that. I'm going to mention one more that I think is just fun. Hal Chase is one of the stars of the set. And the reason he's one of the stars of the set is that the two photographers who did many of the center panel photographs were Charles Conlon in New York and Louis Van Ooyen in Cleveland. Well, they would position themselves either at first base or third base. So there's a lot of photographs of action taking place at first or at third. Chase was the first baseman for the Yankees, the Highlanders, so he's featured on a lot of cards. And it talks about what a great fielder he is and that he doesn't play stuck to the base. And he at one point is quoted as saying, "I have a natural advantage because I'm a left-hander. There will come a time when right-handed first basemen are as rare as left-handed third basemen, shortstops, and so forth." And in particular, he said, "You have a natural advantage as a left-handed first baseman on the sacrifice killing play." I thought, well, what is the sacrifice killing play? So I had to look this up. You almost never see it, with one exception I'll mention in a moment. It means the following. Imagine a runner at second base with maybe one out or no outs. The batter tries to bunt the ball to advance the runner from second to third. We rarely see this now because a runner at second is already in scoring position. Why waste an out when you could hit a single to drive him in? But the point is, in those days, in the dead ball era, when balls didn't travel as far and you played much more station-to-station baseball, you did have batters who would try to bunt a man from second to third. And the point is, if you are a first baseman and you charge and you pick up the bunt, you can in one motion throw to third, get the runner who's trying to get from second base to third base, thus killing the sacrifice play. Well, just last week on my YouTube feed, what comes up but a play from 1986 when Keith Hernandez of the Mets does exactly that. And this was a game against the Reds. Go onto YouTube and put Hernandez. I think I have the link here. Put in Hernandez Mets turn a 3-5-4 double play. Hernandez Mets turn a 3, and you will see exactly this. He scoops the ball up. He's 3. He throws to the third baseman, who is 5, who then throws back to first. The second baseman now has come to cover first. But that's the sacrifice killing play. So that didn't shock me, but that was something I learned about the way the game of baseball has evolved. You would almost never talk today about a first baseman who can charge a bunt and make an out at third, but that was something that happened at the time. And for that, a left-hander is certainly advantageous.
That's amazing. That's amazing. We have just a little bit of time left. What I wanted to do really quickly was I'm just going to share my screen. For anybody that's on Instagram, you can follow Phil on Instagram. Here's a look at his Instagram page. You can see it's called T202_ One Splendid Season. And Phil has been sharing little bits and pieces of the book and some just elements surrounding the book on his Instagram. So anybody that does have Instagram, I would encourage you to follow Phil as he continues to share material from the publication. And again, here is a link to Phil's book on Amazon. Phil, any last thoughts or whether it's about the book itself or about the cards that you wanted to share with collectors?
I'm aware that some other sets like the T206s get a lot more attention, and I've just always been captivated by the T202s for the reasons I mentioned, the center panel photographs and the captions and the annotation. And so this has been a labor of love for me. And if I can turn some other people onto it, I think is a terrific set. That's great. Otherwise, I hope people enjoy. They can reach me if anybody wishes to, if anybody finds corrections or errors, or for heaven's sakes, if you get the book and you know of a center panel photograph that I have not included there, I'd love to see that. So let me know. If you go to my website, which is, I'll hold this up. You can, it's pmrbooks.com/T202. And there you can read quite a bit about the book. You can see some sample pages, but there's also a way to reach me at the end if anybody wants to. So I'd be happy to hear from anybody. And I just hope people enjoy it. It's a great hobby, and everybody has different interests, different tastes. And this is one of mine. And if this is enjoyable to people, so much the better.
Fantastic. Again, guys, the book is One Splendid Season Baseball in America in 1912. Phil, thank you so much for your time and for sharing some thoughts. And we've already got some people that have it coming in the mail. So looking forward to hearing some thoughts from everybody on the book. Phil, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Take care, everybody.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. And stay tuned for Collectors at 9. Everybody's going to be doing a little bit of a national recap. So enjoy that, guys. Have a great Sunday night, and I'll see you guys next Sunday. Take care.